So while we are here, another really important historical thing that takes place here and takes place in this general area was when Kamehameha Ekahi comes to Maui to do battle. Now we have to remember, Kamehameha is a Hawaii Island chief, and his lands are really the lands that are closest to Maui. His lands are the lands that face Maui. So his whole upbringing, he looks across the Ale Nui Haha and sees us almost his whole life. And so when he begins to have this desire to ascend into rulership, he first, which is completely right, he first tries to take over his own island. He tries to take over Hawaii Island and is unable to do that. We have to remember, he was unable to take over his whole island. So then he only took half over, his half. And so he goes, okay, this is too hard. I'm going across the Ale Nui Haha channel because it's right over there. Maui's over there. I'm going to go over there. Preparation for war does not happen in secret. You cannot prepare for war in secret. You cannot prepare the number of canoes, the number of weapons, training the number of men needed for a large war exploit without people knowing. So people know. Stuff's happening on Hawaii Island, and Kamehameha look like he's amassing this war campaign over there. Other Hawaii chiefs have tried to take over Maui and have in pieces, but never the whole island. And they usually approached from what we now know as Kihei. They usually approach Maui from that end. It's a little bit calmer when you get past the Ale Nui Haha channel. It's much calmer to come in, and then they would come across the neck part or the isthmus part of Maui to try and take over Maui. Kamehameha did not do that. He instead went north and came around Hana and Waialua and Wailua and Kailua and around this way to come in. The much more difficult travel because it is upwind. Yeah, it's upwind. So you have to choose exactly the right time to leave his area, to leave Kauai High and to come north and then across to Maui. So he came in a very unusual way in comparison to the chiefs that came previously from Hawaii Island. It is in coming here and coming around the corner, again, it's not a surprise. The Maui people can look out on the ocean and see hundreds of canoes coming. It's like, uh-oh, you know, this is happening. So message is sent to the ruling ali'i. Well, the ruling ali'i at that time was Kahekili, but he was not here. He was on Oahu. And by the way, for me, he ruled more than Kamehameha did. Under Kahekili's rule was Maui, Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olawe, and Oahu. And he was living on Oahu at the time when Kamehameha decides to come. And his son Kalani Kupule is living here on Maui to take care of the island. So the message comes, you can read the accounts in history books. There's a little bit of skirmish here and there coming down along the shoreline. He stops in at Halehaku to give his offerings to Kukailimoku, his war god, to see if he would be successful. Kukailimoku tells him he will be successful. He continues. So as he comes here, he lands his canoes along the bay here, where you see the white beaches. That's the areas that he lands his canoes. Because over here is all rocky. Yeah, so he comes right around Kahului and you know, kind of towards where the breakwater is now. So comes around in that corner. He gives, when they land, he gives the well-known statement, "Imua inapo ki'i inu ika vai ava ava." In other words, he's telling them, you know, we're going forward. The vai ava ava is the bitter waters, which means we're going to die. We're going to die. He also tells them to take apart their canoes, to take the ama and the yako off. Now, what does that tell his warriors? There is no retreat. You cannot just jump the canoe and go out. Take it apart. We go to win or we go to die. So that was his message to them. So, as is Hawaiian warfare, there are agreements that are made. Where are we going to meet, to do battle? And, you know, I often describe it like intermediate school. You know, when you tell, okay, you bring your guys, I bring my guys, we're going behind the gym and we're going to have at it. Let's go. Well, kind of like that. You bring your guys over here, I bring my guys over here, and at this hour, we will have at it. What that does is give each side time to prepare with their gods. Gives them each time to prepare, do the ceremonies, and to get themselves spiritually as well as physically prepared for warfare. And that's what happened. And that's what would have happened here, is that preparation for the ceremonies, for war, would have happened here. So we have accounts that it was out there in what is known as Ihu Ka'ihuwa'a, or probably the sandy area fronting Kahului Bay is where it could have started, because it is the largest open space. And there are thousands. There are thousands of them. There's not just like 5 canoes and 5 canoes. There's thousands of them. The battle continues day after day, because hard, you know, to fight when it's hand-to-hand, face-to-face battle. Days and days go on with no clear winner, until Kamehameha decides to bring his ship into Kahului Harbor. And when he brings his sailing ship, a Western sailing ship, into Kahului Harbor, on it is a cannon. And the cannon is called Lopaka. And he brings the cannon off the ship and begins to use the cannon as part of the warfare. I'm a Maui person, so for me, Kamehameha cheat, because we had no cannon. We had very little guns and Western warfare. Some, but not to the extent that Kamehameha had. And the turning point was that cannon. The turning point was that cannon. And as he began to shoot the cannon into the battle, the Maui warriors couldn't do anything to combat the cannon. So the war began to move further and further up into Iao Valley. If any of you go to Iao Valley, you know it starts wide and then it gets narrow real quick, and it bottlenecks really quick right there where Kepaniwai Park is. It is there that that term, as well as another name, was given for the battle. Kepaniwai means the damming of the waters, because so many bodies fell into the river that it dammed the river from flowing. And when it finally did flow, it flowed red with the blood of those warriors that had fallen in the river. The other name of the battle that comes out is Ka'ua'upali. Ka'ua'upali means the clawing of the cliffs, because they tried to escape by climbing the cliffs of Iao Valley. And if you ever go into Iao Valley, you will see those cliffs, how high they are, how close they are, and how difficult they are to ascend. One of the really important things that happens in that valley is the highest ranking females chiefesses of the Hawaiian world were. That was Keopu'olani and her sister and their mother were up there in the valley watching the warfare that was below to give their mana, to provide their ali'i and mana to the Maui people. When it was seen that it became dangerous for them to remain, they were taken over the cliffs into Lahaina and taken to Molokai, where her grandmother, Kalakua, no, not that, their grandmother was at the moment. She was not well, but they took them over to their grandmother. That was a very important event, because the high chiefesses of Hawaii were then taken to Molokai, which was still under Kahekili's rulership. So who is Kamehameha doing battle with? He is doing battle with Kahekili's son, Kalani Kupule. Kalani Kupule begins to lose the battle because of all that we just spoke about. He begins to lose the battle, so he escapes over through Iao, gets a canoe, and goes to Oahu, where Kahekili is. Okay, this is a little haha in my head, because I kind of try and think, okay, Kalani Kupule goes to Oahu to tell his father what happened. It might have gone something like this. Dad, I lost Maui. I don't know how else you're going to tell your father. Dad, I lost Maui. And what does this amazing ruler, Kahekili, have to now decide for the benefit of his people? For the benefit of his people. And you can read, the next parts of the story, what Kamehameha does. He takes the chiefesses with him when he goes back to Hawaii Island, and he goes back to Hawaii and prepares for Oahu. So Maui was an important part of Kamehameha gaining all of the islands. He did not have to fight Maui, fight Molokai, fight Lanai, fight Oahu. He just had to fight Kahekili. He just had to fight this one ali'i nui who had gained everything else. So he only had to get his kingdom. Not a bad deal. And so that's what he does. Just a little fast forward, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, what the agreement was between Kamehameha and Kahekili is that Kamehameha would wait until Kahekili died, and then he would come and try and do battle again. So that's what happens. They agreed. Warfare was gentlemanly in Hawaiian culture. They agreed. All right, so Kamehameha goes back to Hawaii Island. He does his ceremonies on Pu'ukohola. He prepares Pu'ukohola for the push to Oahu, and he prepares his warriors for the push to Oahu to do battle after Kahekili passes away, as their agreement was. So once and who does he fight again? Kalani Kupule. who loses Oahu, which means now all of the islands that were under the rulership of Kahekili and his son Kalani Kupule now belong to Kamehameha. This place here, after Kamehameha did won Maui, after he was successful in Iao, he came here to do his closing ceremonies for this warfare. And it was as much political as it was religious, because this is Kahekili's heiau. So he comes here to do his I beat you ceremonies at Kahekili's heiau here. So, you know, this particular place is absolutely important for in Hawaiian history, but most important for our Maui history. So as we sit here and we've talked about the Nawai'eha and we've talked about the warfare that occurred from Kahului all the way up into Iao Valley, we can see from this particular place, number one, where Iao Valley is, how it is situated in this political and societal place of Maui, with this heiau and the other two heiaus of Kahekili. Iao Valley is well known and has been considered sacred for generations upon generations. Mahalo.